structure of troop and kind of presence and upravljanje.
And the rule.
You mean which nationality?
Yes.
If they mean what they say, a lot now depends on whether the NATO countries will play ball and play with the numbers, or take the hard line and keep pushing. Either way, the bombing continues.
Bombing has resulted in an apology from NATO, but that means little to the people who found themselves being attacked by those who are supposed to protect them. Refugees who'd spent weeks in a prison inside Kosovo were coming over the border at the same time as NATO jets dropped their payloads just yards away.
I saw the planes bombing inside Albanian territory. We ran into the forest and we walked until we got here.
Yesterday's attacks have left the aid organizations bewildered and confused. They readily admit now that their operation to secure the transit of refugees from the border down to Kukës is left in tatters. It's simply too dangerous for them to operate in the area. A few days ago, UNHCR was able to pick people up at the border post and give them aid and transport. Now they're faced with yet another obstacle.
It's well known that refugees are crossing this border, that we're trying to assist them as best we can, which we can't do right now. I mean, we're being driven down from the border crossing by sniper fire, then mortar fire, then local military maneuvers, and now NATO bombardment.
But despite the damage caused both to Albanian territory and to NATO's reputation, the people here are desperate for the bombing to continue, but on the right side of the border. Ross Appleyard, Sky News, Albania.
Elie Wiesel is reporting directly back to President Clinton on the plight of the refugees in the camps. He said he'd come to Macedonia to listen to their fear, their anger and their pain. A Nobel Peace Laureate, a professor and author, he, above most men, can understand their suffering because he's a survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp.
There should be more sensitivity in the world to their agony. They have been uprooted and they have left everything behind, and every person has a story to tell, a story of fear, terror, panic and desolation.
These are some of the men he spoke to in the border transit camp of Blace. Expelled from a prison in Kosovo, their experience still haunting them, their bodies still bearing the scars of sadistic beatings and stabbings meted out by the Serbs. Their only crime, to be Kosovars.
What's emerging is not only a picture of systematic brutality and torture during interrogation. Some of the prisoners have actually had members of their own family killed in front of them by their Serb jailers.
I can just tell you that they've been through hell, that some are very badly traumatized, injured, and you can imagine, I mean, they have not been eating properly. They were beating up quite often.
For many refugee families, there's still no respite. Such is the pressure for space in the camps, they're being moved on. Today, once again, tearful farewells. Friends newly made, now freshly lost. David Chater, Sky News, Macedonia.
Russia's Balkans envoy, Viktor Chernomyrdin, has said that for the first time there's a realistic chance of ending the conflict. Mr. Chernomyrdin was speaking in Bonn before setting off for Belgrade on a joint diplomatic mission with the EU envoy, the Finnish President Martti Ahtisaari. Lengthy talks in Bonn, also involving the US Deputy Secretary of State, Strobe Talbot, thrashed out sufficient agreement on common peace proposals to present to President Milosevic. It's still not clear exactly how Russian and NATO troops would work together in a security force to get refugees back home to Kosovo.
Well, a few moments ago, President Clinton was speaking about Kosovo during an address to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs in the USA. He warned the Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic that he must now choose peace and announced a further build-up of forces in the region.
Today, I am announcing my decision to provide about 7,000 of these troops for Kosovo, about 15% of the total force. The leading elements in headquarters are already in Albania and Macedonia, ready to deploy to Kosovo within a few hours to oversee the safe return of the refugees. The additional NATO resources required are beginning to move to the region. Finally, this strategy will enable us to put in place a plan for lasting peace and stability in the Balkans when Mr. Milosevic is stopped and the ethnic cleansing is reversed. For that to happen, The European Union and the United States must be far-sighted. We must do for Southeastern Europe what we did for Western Europe after World War II, for Central Europe, for Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and others after the Cold War. We must give them a positive path to a prosperous shared future.
President Clinton speaking in Colorado Springs. Meanwhile, the hard work of negotiation is going on in Belgrade, where the Russian and European envoys have arrived for their meetings with President Milosevic, yet another attempt to find a solution to the Kosovo conflict.
They finally arrived in Belgrade. Mr. Atazari in one plane, Mr. Chernomyrdin in another. The negotiations between them before they got there were as tough as anything they'll face with President Milosevic. But the two mediators have now agreed proposals to put to the Yugoslav leader.
This is a historic day for Yugoslavia.
Это исторический день для Югославии.
Mr. Chernomyrdin and I are coming with a peace plan, and we hope that after these talks,
И мы надеемся, что после этих разговоров здесь
we can proceed to the peaceful development in the region.
Mr. Chernomyrdin said he hoped they could achieve a solution quickly, but this was just the start of the process. Earlier, at a hotel outside Bonn, the peace mission nearly ended before it even began. While reporters waited outside, the mediators disagreed strongly over the message to take to Belgrade. The Russian spokesman blamed the Americans for springing new conditions on them. Once again, it's the makeup of a peacekeeping force to go into Kosovo that appears to be at the heart of the discussions. Mr. Chernomyrdin will of course concern at NATO by his suggestion that Russia will participate, but under a separate command. NATO insists it won't allow anything that could lead to the effective partition of Kosovo.
As far as NATO is concerned, we're talking about a single force, not a number of different forces, a single force with unity of command, robust rules of engagement, and a common approach throughout Kosovo. We are not going to do anything which could increase the chances of some sort of partition, whether virtual or real.
As the envoys go into a long night of talks, there is a little more optimism. But it's those sort of details which will decide whether or not this peace mission is successful. John Lyne, BBC News.
Between Slobodan Milosevic and the European and Russian envoys have ended and will resume tomorrow. The envoys, Viktor Chernomyrdin and Marti Ahtisaari, flew to Belgrade earlier today to present a peace plan drawn up in Bonn yesterday. Sky's diplomatic correspondent, Tim Marshall, has been following the day's developments.
It took a week to get back here. It almost didn't happen. But the return of the Russian is encouraging news. Viktor Chernomyrdin was accompanied by the EU representative, Marti Ahtisaari. Their talks in Bonn had almost collapsed when the Russians claimed the Americans introduced tough new conditions. However, they seem to have worked. The deal is basically a Russian and American one. Now it needs Slobodan Milosevic.
This is a historic day for Yugoslavia.
Это исторический день для Югославии.
Mr. Chernomyrdin and I are coming with a peace plan.
Мы приезжаем с планом мира.
And offer for peace and
предложением мира.
And I fully agree with what Mr. Chernomyrdin said. We have been working very hard.
Я полностью согласен с тем, что сказал господин Черномырдин. Мы работали очень тяжело.
For weeks now to prepare ourselves for this trip.
Sky News understands that the draft document includes elements acceptable to Yugoslavia. They include that Kosovo remains part of Serbia. There will be no referendum on independence. The KLA must also stop fighting and disband. And NATO isn't coming. Something called a civil and security force is mentioned in the text. That would include Russian troops. So both sides can claim victory. And then, to avoid NATO politicians having to sign a document with an indicted war criminal, President Milosevic, the entire deal can be taken to the United Nations for approval. And that's what many Serbs now want. As well as the power blackouts and water cuts, there are now transport difficulties. Buses only run for 2 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. The state-run media appears to be preparing the public for a deal. It was praising the efforts of the government in its search for peace and the people and military for holding out for so long. There's a chance here for peace by the end of the month. It may be even sooner. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Belgrade.
And Tim joins us now on the...
After the Irish government said they'd refuse to issue visas to the Yugoslavian players. Dublin's move comes after European soccer's governing body, UEFA, refused to call off Saturday's controversial tie because of the Kosovo crisis. UEFA could now retaliate by kicking Mick McCarthy's team out of the competition.
The players were training today, but they could be asking themselves for what? Their own government has put the ball firmly in UEFA's court by refusing to issue entry visas for the Yugoslav players. A decision taken after football's governing body in Europe refused to call off the match. The Irish government has protested all along that the Group 8 fixture can't take place, stating the situation in Kosovo is unacceptable. But protesting is one thing, making a decision to deny the opposing team visas to play in Dublin is another.
The position is that it is not for the government to force a sporting decision on a body until the body makes that decision. If it refuses, then we have a decision to make. But I want to assure you, we are not in the business of making an easy decision for anybody to throw Ireland out of a tournament. That would be entirely unreasonable.
And that's precisely what could happen. UEFA has said it would decide on any necessary measures if Ireland doesn't go ahead with the fixture. That could mean points deducted, or more realistically, Ireland kicked out of Euro 2000. It's left the players in a difficult situation, and none more so than their manager, who, speaking before the Irish government's announcement, said his team were finding it hard to focus.
But, you know, at the back of their minds, they're umming and ahhing. They're bound to be, individually and collectively, as to whether the game's going ahead. But it appears good. They're a great bunch, terrific bunch.
So what happens now? The Irish players continue to train and prepare for a match that may never happen. Principles are at stake. The Irish government clearly feels it has a justifiable cause for complaint, but it could cost the Irish team a place in the European Championships. Mark Bishop, Sky News.
Matthew Chance has the details from Brussels.
A welcome from NATO to a diplomatic initiative the alliance says will put the intentions of President Milosevic to the test.
They will both take a firm message to Belgrade, the message that they're not there to negotiate, they're there to explain, to clarify if necessary, but to test the will of Milosevic, not only in word, but moreover in deed, to comply with the conditions of the alliance and the international community, and to demonstrate that willingness by withdrawing his forces.
But diplomacy so far appears to have had little impact on NATO's campaign of airstrikes. Fierce fighting between rebels and government forces on the Albanian frontier with southwestern Kosovo has allowed NATO to carry out what it says are the heaviest strikes against the Yugoslav armed forces since the beginning of the air campaign. In the latest confirmed NATO attacks, officials say alliance warplanes destroyed at least 32 Serb artillery pieces and a range of other heavy military equipment. NATO says there have also been consistent attacks in recent days against Yugoslav aircraft on the ground. But as the airstrikes continue, NATO says it's preparing its forces for peace. Alliance officials say nearly 48,000 troops, 7,000 from the US, have now been earmarked as peacekeepers for Kosovo in the event of agreement with Belgrade.
It will have a UN Security Council resolution, and that is being worked on actively, and we've said all along that it will have a NATO core. That means that NATO countries will be prominently represented in the force, and it will have a NATO command and control structure.
NATO officials say they're now watching closely for developments in Belgrade, but they say President Milosevic must not only accept but also carry out alliance demands before they will even consider a pause in the bombing campaign. Matthew Chance, CNN, at NATO headquarters in Brussels.
We cannot go weary of this campaign because Mr. Milosevic didn't capitulate when the first bombs fell. We cannot abandon a just cause because an adversary holds out for more than a few news cycles. I reject that. Our allies reject that. I know the vast majority of Americans reject that. We must be willing to pay the price of time and effort to reverse the course of ethnic cleansing. The benefits will be far greater and last much longer than the costs.
Well, Mr. Clinton urged Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic to accept a peace plan in order to, quote, cut his losses. Well, Belgrade suffered a legal setback on Wednesday. That's when the International Court of Justice dismissed a Yugoslav request to order a halt to the NATO airstrikes. The court, the United Nations' highest judicial body, rejected Belgrade's claim that NATO is in effect committing genocide against the Yugoslav people. But the court did express concern about the legal basis of NATO's action and said it would take a closer look at whether it was in violation of the United
States. Portparol NATO-a Jamie Shea saopštio je da sada postoji široka saglasnost predstavnika 38 država za obezbeđivanje dovoljne količine ljudstva za snage pod vodstvom NATO-a, pri čemu je već obećano 48.888 vojnika. Te snage će dejstvovati pod zajedničkim nazivom Operacija Združeni zaštitnik. Shea je ukazao da će biti dobrodošla pomoć i drugih država i naglasio da ima prostora i za Rusiju. Portparol NATO je ustvrdio da će narod Kosova lako moći da uoči razliku između mirovnih snaga alijanse i represivnih jugoslovenskih snaga.
Oni će ubrzo vidjeti da im snage NATO-a nisu neprijatelj nego prijatelj, da NATO nije tamo da im uništava život i imovinu, nego da im pomogne da ih ponovo izgradi. Da NATO ne tera ljude, nego ih vraća kući i stvara bezbedne uslove koji će im onda omogućiti da ostanu i to zauvek. I to je, dame i gospodo, suštinska razlika između oružanih snaga koje predstavljaju najgoru stranu represivnog, surovog, diktatorskog društva i oružanih snaga koje predstavljaju najbolje osobine demokratskih društava, rekao je portparol Severnoatlantskog saveza.
Portparol Shea je podsjetio da je narod Bosne i Hercegovine već uvideo kvalitet mirovnih snaga pod vodstvom NATO-a u toj zemlji i obećao da će snage Zapadne alijanse imati isti pristup i na Kosovu. Shea je objasnio da ideje koje dolaze iz Rusije o podeli Kosova nisu prihvatljive za Severnoatlantski savez, jer alijansa insistira da u mirovnim snagama mora postojati jezgro koje će sačinjavati NATO sa ujedinjenom centralnom kontrolom. Jamie Shea je zapazio da je 11 država saopštilo da će se po takvim uslovima sa zadovoljstvom pridružiti NATO u tom pothvatu. Vazdušna kampanja se inače nastavlja, pri čemu NATO usredsređuje napade na jugoslovenske snage na planini Paštrik u blizini granice sa Albanijom. Te jugoslovenske snage vode teške borbe sa pripadnicima oslobodilačke vojske Kosova, a NATO ističe da je to učinilo srpske snage vidljivijim, a samim tim i boljim metama. Uprkos lošem vremenu, NATO pogađa desetine artiljerijskih oruđa, kao i tenkove i druga oklopna vozila. Jamie Shea je izjavio da se nada da će sve veće razumevanje između zapadnih sila i Rusije olakšati prisiljavanje predsjednika Slobodana Miloševića da prihvati sve uslove Zapadne alijanse za prekidanje vazdušne kampanje. Međutim, dok Milošević to ne učini, vazdušni napadi će se nastaviti.
Američki sekretar za odbranu William Cohen izjavio da će sutra u Beloj kući predsjednik Bill Clinton i njegovi najviši vojni savjetnici razgovarati i o mogućim invazionim snagama za Kosovo, ali je dodao da se jedini planovi koji se trenutno razrađuju u NATO odnose na manje mirovne snage, o čemu iz Sekretarijata za odbranu izveštava dopisni Glas Amerike Jim Randall.
Planeri NATO-a već neko vreme razrađuju pojedinosti u vezi sa snagama jačine do 50.000 vojnika koji bi štitili albanske izbeglice u procesu povratka na Kosovo, kada i ako mirovni sporazum bude potpisan. Međutim, u nekim objavljenim izveštajima se navodi da će se šefovi američkog vazduhoplovstva, armije, mornarice i marinaca, koji sačinjavaju združeni generalštab američkih oružanih snaga, sastati sutra sa predsjednikom Billom Clintonom radi razgovora o mnogo većim, bolje opremljenim snagama koje bi mogle da izvrše invaziju na Kosovo. Sekretar za odbranu William Cohen je izjavio da će predsjednik i njegovi savjetnici verovatno razgovarati o svim opcijama, ali je insistirao da se jedina akcija koju vojni planeri razrađuju odnosi na mirovne snage, takozvani KFOR.
Siguran sam da će se razmatrati širok spektar pitanja o tome da li postoje opcija za ulazak kopnenih snaga pod borbenim uslovima. Ali, kao što smo više puta rekli, u zemljama NATO-a postoji snažan konsenzus za vazdušne operacije, ali ne postoji konsenzus za ulazak kopnenih snaga pod borbenim uslovima, rekao je William Cohen.
Slovenske vlasti su 29. aprila tužile 10 vodećih članica NATO za nezakonitu upotrebu sile i genocid i traže odštetu. Spor protiv SAD i Španije je danas iz proceduralnih razloga sasvim skinut sa dnevnog reda, a sud tek treba da odluči da li će biti postupka protiv preostalih 8 NATO zemalja. Ubedljivom većinom glasova 12:3 Međunarodni sud pravde ocenio je da nije nadležan za izricanje bilo kakve privremene mere, zato što tužene države ne priznaju njegovu nadležnost za spor koji je inicirala jugoslovenska strana. Sud je ocenio da ni konvencija o sprečavanju i kažnjavanju zločina genocida ne može biti osnov za njegovu naredbu o prekidu bombardovanja kako je Jugoslavija predložila. Osim toga, sudije u bombardovanju ne vide nameru uništenja nacionalne, etničke, rasne ili verske grupe, koja je osnovni element zločina genocida, i smatraju da se upotreba sile protiv neke države ne može izjednačiti sa genocidom.
Sud je međutim izrazio veliku zabrinutost zbog korišćenja sile protiv Jugoslavije, što, kako je rečeno, otvara ozbiljna pitanja međunarodnog prava. Sudije su izrazile i duboku zabrinutost zbog ljudske tragedije, gubitka života i ogromnih patnji na Kosovu, kao i zbog stalnog gubitka ljudskih života u Jugoslaviji. Zastupnik Jugoslavije Rodoljub Betinski izrazio je razočaranje i nezadovoljstvo današnjom odlukom. On je na konferenciji za novinare ocenio da je sud morao da učini nešto da spreči gubitak ljudskih života i da pravne formalnosti ne mogu biti izgovor za odbijanje jugoslovenskog zahteva. Drugi članovi jugoslovenskog tima tvrdili su da su sudije glasale pod pritiskom, pa čak i suprotno svojim ubeđenjima i savesti. Podnošenjem tužbe jugoslovenska vlada pružila je priliku zemljama NATO da pred sudom dokažu svoju pravdu, ali su one to odbile negiranjem nadležnosti suda, što govori samo za sebe, istakao je Betinski. Prema njegovom tumačenju, upozorenjem da sporove treba rešavati mirnim sredstvima, sud je u stvari ocenio da je bombardovanje nezakonito i Jugoslaviji dao za pravo. Predstavnici tuženih država odluku suda primili su kao očekivanu i ispravnu i procenjuju da dalje vođenje spora nije svrsishodno jer nema izgleda na uspeh. Betinski je rekao da će jugoslovenska vlada o nastavljanju spora odlučiti u zavisnosti od toga da li će diplomatski put dovesti do željenog cilja, a to je zaustavljanje bombardovanja. Iz Haga za Glas Amerike, Julija Bogojeva.
To the Security Council, the official said they found indisputable evidence of, quote, organized, unquote, violence against ethnic Albanian civilians aimed at forcing them out of the province. It's estimated more than 700,000 refugees have fled or been forced from Kosovo. Hundreds of thousands of others are said to be displaced inside the province.
Also inspected villages in Serbia, which would come under NATO fire. Mr. Vieira de Mello concluded that a solution to the crisis was needed urgently in order to enable the necessary relief work to get underway. Our UN correspondent Mark Davenport says that Security Council members took different views on the report. The American representative concluded that continued airstrikes were needed to stop Serb aggression into Kosovo. But Russia blamed the humanitarian crisis in part on NATO bombing.
Well, Mr. Vieira de Mello's team toured throughout Serbia, Montenegro and Kosovo. The briefing that he gave to UN Security Council members earlier on today concentrated, I think, mostly on Kosovo, although he did cover the other aspects of his trip. He described really the landscape that he'd seen, the houses burned, the farms deserted, the rampage of terror, as you were saying there. And he concluded that despite Yugoslav claims to the contrary, the violence that had gone on inside Kosovo had neither been spontaneous nor uncontrolled.
That an organized and systematic campaign has been ongoing in Kosovo to instill fear, terror in the civilian population of Albanian origin, and to force them into displacement and exile.
So the UN Security Council have this damning report. What are they going to do about it?
Well, obviously they were impressed by the report, but inevitably UN Security Council members drew their own rather different conclusions. The American representative came out and said this proved her country's point that Milosevic was to blame for the crisis and that the NATO military action would continue. Russia pointed out that in reference to what had happened in Serbia, where Mr. Vieira de Mello pointed out that there was a real chance of a humanitarian crisis which would affect the most vulnerable members of society being brought about by the combined effects of sanctions and bombing, that NATO also had to take some responsibility there. But Mr. Vieira de Mello says that what needs to happen now is for the peace talks to move forward urgently and for real humanitarian relief work to get underway.
The refugees is that Kosovo should be policed by a force built around the alliance with one simple command structure. But the Russian plan for its troops to operate under separate command raises a spectre of dividing the province, a partition that could see Russian forces in the north and NATO in the south. NATO's reaction came quickly.
There needs to be unity of command for this to be genuinely effective in order for it not to slip down a slippery slope into either partition or ineffectiveness or worse.
As if to increase the pressure, from America it was declared that President Clinton will meet all his military leaders on Thursday, for the first time since the conflict started. The agenda will include the possible use of troops for a ground invasion. And Mr. Clinton gave President Milosevic another tough warning.
There is a clear choice before the Serbian leader. He can cut his losses now and accept the basic requirements of a just peace, or he can continue to force military failure and economic ruin on his people. In the end, the outcome will be the same.
To emphasize overall American involvement, Mr. Clinton also announced that the US would contribute 7,000 troops to any force if Belgrade accepted a peace agreement. Paul Royal, BBC News.
Die Albaner machen gute Geschäfte mit der Wohnungsnot der Flüchtlinge. Sie vermieten ihre Wohnungen für horrende Summen. Spannungen zwischen den Vertriebenen und den Einheimischen können nicht ausbleiben. Diese Familie aus dem Kosovo bezahlt für 3 kleine Zimmer 900 Mark Miete. Bis zum Ende des Monats haben sie noch Geld. Was danach wird, wissen sie nicht. Schwer trifft es vor allem die Frauen. Sie hocken den ganzen Tag zu Hause und trauen sich nicht raus. Ich gehe nicht auf die Straße, mein Mann wurde bereits umgebracht und ich habe kleine Kinder. Die Flüchtlinge und die Albaner in Kokes leben in unterschiedlichen Welten. Konflikte sind deshalb vorprogrammiert.
Was ist das eigentlich für ein Prozess?
De Mello's team visited Kosovo, Serbia and Montenegro last month to assess the humanitarian needs on the ground. Inside Kosovo, the UN Under-Secretary General said he'd heard about a rampage of killing, burning and looting. He rejected Yugoslav arguments that the violence had all been spontaneous and uncontrolled.
The accounts given by the internally displaced of different forms of organized violence, harassment, brutality, threats from individuals that were often masked, but that were presumed to belong to Yugoslav security forces, certainly indicated to us that an organized and systematic campaign has been ongoing in Kosovo.
UN Security Council members were impressed by Mr. Vieira de Mello's briefing, although, as usual, they drew differing conclusions.
Well, I think it endorses the international community's concern for the horrible campaign of ethnic cleansing that is going on in Kosovo and reiterates the need to bring this to closure.
Apart from the briefing on situation in Kosovo proper, which confirmed quite a number of very serious suspicions about the policies of Belgrade,